sometimes rapid. It took nearly an hour later for us to master the battlefield, not knowing how many enemies were destroyed that afternoon. Our unit returned to the original starting position at more than 6 p.m. when the sun had set in the west, leaving only a few rays of sunlight. Because we were near the shed for the Mortars, I went close. To look inside the shed were 5 Mortars. All had been shrouded and put into body bags. Outside the bag was a piece of paper recording the details of the Mortars. I stood outside, looking, and recognized V through the bag because his neck blood was still pooling inside the bag, bidding farewell to him and the comrades who sacrificed. I returned to the unit, summarizing this battle. The battalion headquarters lost 2 people, V from transport and Brother Hyan from operations, while Brother Ainch and Brother Truong were wounded in the scout squad. Hone was also wounded. So, since the battle on January 1979 until this battle, the scout squad had 3 sacrifices, Sun Uwai and Lion, and regarding the wounded, there was Brother Luyan, who was still in the hospital, and Brother Truyen, who went to the art troop. The next morning we marched out to Road 4, continuing the long days of war. When we reached the road, we saw Army Corps trucks waiting. The trucks turned around and drove back toward Phnom Penh. That evening our unit billeted in some neighborhood. I was not clear where. The next day, early in the morning at first light, we started marching onto the landing craft and went up the Mekong River. On the march, we saw several escort patrol boats, and on our transport boat, we also saw 12.8 millimeter machine guns. The Mekong River had segments that were vast and wide, and narrow segments where patrol boats had to speed ahead to search, preventing pot ambushes at any suspicious segments. The boats fired 12.8 millimeter guns for safety. By about 3 p.m. the boat docked at Kampong Speu to offload troops. At that time we billeted in a fishing port or a river wharf of some sort. The next day we were still allowed to rest there. We dragged each other to go improve our diet with fish, borrowing a boat from the Cambodians, but none of us knew how to row. Wobbling around for a while without success, we had to ask some Cambodian teenagers to row the boat out about 300 or 400 meters from shore. A grenade was thrown down and small dead fish floated white over an area mixed with big fish. Those who were good swimmers jumped in to catch fish. I could swim, but not more than 10 meters before sinking, so I had to sit on the boat, not daring to go down, but sitting for a While seeing so many fish floating up, I got greedy and jumped in, grabbing 2 fish with both hands. In the moment of excitement, having no hands left to paddle, I swallowed several mouthfuls of water and nearly drowned, so I had to release the fish and swim back to the boat to sit and pant, looking at the Cambodian kids sitting on the boat, scooping fish with nets so easily they caught even more than us soldiers. So when we got to shore, we had to claim a share with them. That afternoon at about 4 p.m. I saw a helicopter landing near where the unit was billeted. We stopped to rest there for a few days. I do not remember clearly, only knowing that one day early in the morning, the unit started marching on Road 5 to a submerged crossing. I do not know the name of the crossing. Then our whole unit turned left, leaving Road 5, turning south, and beginning long days of sweeping marches in the Uran mountain forests. The first few days our unit swept through diptero carp forests, encountering only scattered enemies who were either destroyed or fled. One afternoon, while marching, we encountered a long and deep water ditch with very clear water. The unit paused there. We bathed and washed freely, resting for a night. The next morning we continued to strike deep into the forest and started encountering more enemies. They used the forest trees and scrub bamboo to crawl and run, then turned back to poke at our flanks, causing difficulties for our soldiers. At that time, the infantry companies spread out in a horizontal line, flooding forward with the battalion headquarters supporting from the rear. That day, we reached a high mountain. 1 infantry company occupied the top while we moved along the foot of the mountain to the other slope. During this time, we found many enemy rice warehouses in the forest. They built them every 200 or 300 meters. The rice warehouses were also built as stilt houses with roofs and walls made of diptero carp leaves. We did nothing else but burn the warehouses. One day, at about 3 a.m., we were penetrating deep, hearing that there was a large enemy base in the forest. It was dark as the inside of a jar. We were marching smoothly when a burst of gunfire exploded. The infantry reacted instantly, so explosions came rapidly. A while later, a Mortar was carried back. It was Lion from the battalion scouts, a Mortar soldier from 78 from Than Hoa. He was hit in the chest when it was fully light. We attacked deep into the forest and found here a temporary village of the enemy. Here we saw enemies mixed with civilians, including ox carts. The enemy ran in panic into the forest, but were surrounded and destroyed by the infantry companies. There were about more than 200 civilians here, mostly old people, women and children. The unit had to assign a section to escort the civilians out. including me, so about more than 10 of us escorted the civilians out along the ox cart. Trail on the way, we were worried partly about being ambushed by pot troops, partly fearing that pot troops were mixed in with the civilians to attack us by surprise, so the brothers had to split up on both sides of the road, keeping a distance from the civilians, walking for about 4 kilometers where. Reached the main road meeting a village, we searched for a while and then sat down to rest, letting the civilians continue, so the civilians went ahead and we followed behind, babbling a few sentences of Cambodian to ask for directions. We knew we were near Road 5, so we cut to another path and let the civilians go wherever they wanted. When reaching Road 5, we met Battalion 7 that night. We slept at the outpost of the brothers in Battalion 7. The next morning, we went to the battalion headquarters to wait for the unit's brothers to come back to receive food and ammo. Not until that afternoon did the unit's brothers come out from the forest. The next morning, we went with the brothers to bring supplies into the unit. Soldiers from infantry companies also went to receive goods. Continuing to sweep with the unit for a while, I transferred to the battalion scout squad. The unit continued long days of sweeping in the Uran mountain forest area. These days of sweeping in this area, our unit also achieved many results, destroying relatively many enemies, destroying many enemy bases. But taking absolutely no prisoners day after day, we marched continuously in deep forests and high mountains. When food ran out, the unit sent people out to get it in this mountainous region. We also found quite a few cassava fields planted by the pot troops for food to feed their army. Perhaps they intended to organize long-term guerrilla warfare. One day, at about 9 a.m., when the unit was marching in the forest, we encountered a very large cassava field. The cassava plants were waist-high. The scouts reported to the battalion, determining there could be many enemies here, so they organized for infantry companies to sweep around the field, while the battalion headquarters and Company 8 spread out in a line flooding into the cassava field. The infantry companies encountered the enemy. The enemy was in the watchtowers and was surprised, unable to resist in time, so they were destroyed. Some ran into the cassava field to hide but met the battalion headquarters soldiers, so they were like fish in a net, losing direction, running wildly, and were wiped out. Finishing the job, we swept again and swept wider around the battalion headquarters, swept along a stream. This stream only had a few puddles left at that time. Our soldiers did not dare go down into the stream but walked on both banks. The vegetation on both banks was overgrown. While walking, suddenly we saw a bush in the stream moving. We pointed our guns down and shouted, "Lurk Daelayan, surrender," seeing an enemy jumping out from a clump of grass and trees. I do not know if he had a severed leg or was disabled. We did not take prisoners anyway. Leading him back was just extra work. When he had 2 legs, we didn't want to lead him back, let alone a cripple. That noon, we rested in a cassava field while the infantry companies swept wider around, occasionally hearing a few gunshots from various places. At about 2 p.m., we continued the work. Before marching, we burned all the temporary enemy sheds, but the cassava field was too big to destroy completely. Just like that, day after day, our unit plowed through the Uran mountain area again and again to find the enemy. At this time in the area, there were also many other units doing the same duty as us. That Uran mountain forest area could be said to have an abundant food source to replenish our health in those hard days, which was cows. There were herds of cows at that time. We were so extravagant that we did not even take the cow legs, but only took the heart and tongue. At this time, we only craved vegetables. Days later, after scouring this area again and again, we got to enjoy the rotten smell of human and animal corpses. During the time sweeping here, perhaps the hardest thing for us was the work with wounded and martyrs with light cases. Sometimes we had to carry them on stretchers. Marching with the unit with heavier cases, the scouts had to cut a path along with transport, and a few infantry brothers supporting to take them back. At this time, I also had to do that duty once or twice. Thinking back, it was truly arduous. Both protecting the wounded and martyrs and guarding against enemy ambushes in this duty. We also replaced the transport brothers in carrying stretchers. Sometimes we only had time to eat a ball of rice and go immediately to get the wounded to the rear in time for treatment. The mission of sweeping and attacking the enemy in the Uran mountain forest area was completed by our unit. Then we were allowed to return to Road 5 to receive the mission to march on to Pursat. We marched up to Pursat by truck. This was perhaps a mechanized march, moving while fighting, opening the road to go fighting the enemy to advance. I remember when marching, the trucks in front had 12.7mm guns mounted, and the trucks behind also had light machine guns mounted where sat in the truck bed, always ready for combat. The trucks were moving smoothly when suddenly from the left side of the road about 200 meters away, there was a muzzle report, the sound of the fan. Blades hissing over our heads exploded on the other side of the road, so the guns were firing into the village while the trucks kept moving on the road from Kampong Speu to Persat. We were ambushed several times like that, but luckily the unit suffered no casualties. There were times when our trucks had to stop so the brothers could jump off to sweep deep and far into the bamboo forest. Perhaps because the units ahead had beaten them into a long retreat, we only encountered small scattered pot groups, but when we opened fire they would run and disappear somewhere, so on any dangerous stretches of road, we had to get off the trucks to sweep deep along both sides while the trucks continued to drive slowly behind us. When we were about 2 or 3 kilometers from Persat, the trucks were driving on a high road near a forest of low trees and scrub bamboo, and we were ambushed again, so we jumped off the trucks to attack deep inside this time. They resisted quite fiercely. We had to take both the 60mm and 82mm mortars off the trucks to bombard them, while simultaneously one infantry company moved up ahead and circled back to flank them, forcing them to flee. The enemy left behind several bodies along a dry stream bank on both sides of the stream. Bamboo grew very thick and low. When we returned to the road, I passed by that dry stream where I saw several killed enemies lying along the bank. Here they had constructed quite solid bunkers. Our unit at that time also had one wounded, a medic from the battalion headquarters. He was a soldier from the class of 78 who had just returned from training at that moment. He was standing at the left door of the truck next to the driver, so he took the bullet for the driver after the job was done. We got back on the trucks to continue marching because from here into Persat both sides were open dry fields, so we could not be ambushed anymore. At about more than 4 p.m., we got off the trucks at a 3-way intersection. This place was Road 56 going into Leash, which was a dirt road, while going straight on the asphalt road led into Persat. The infantry companies deployed south of the road, while the battalion headquarters and Company 8 lay north of the road where there was a dry lake surrounded by many mango trees. We rested here for 1 or 2 days. I do not remember exactly that day. The unit began to march across a river over a bridge that had been blown up, located about 3 or 4 kilometers west of Persat, and then deployed blocking positions, so my unit spread out along the south of Road 5, while north of Road 5 were the battalion headquarters and Company 8, along with an infantry company ready to mobilize to support other places. At this time I saw the direct subordinate companies of the regiment also holding positions south of Road 5 facing toward Leash. For example, Signal Company 18 was also standing at the tip of the spear, taking charge of the road 56 axis heading into Leach. The enemy at this time was attacking very strongly against the outposts day and night to break the siege of the pot troops. That day, the battalion headquarters combined with an infantry company advanced to sweep the north of Road 5 toward the rear of the regiment headquarters to clean up the rear area because we knew small pot groups still existed there. At that time we marched along the west bank of the Persat River to an area with a high dike road cutting across the river. Where the road cut across the river, there was a dam blocking the water, and our unit encountered the enemy. At this time they were in stilt houses located on that crossroad, firing out. The battle lasted about 30 minutes, and we captured that row of houses, then continued to advance on the road, firing into other houses as we moved for safety. Afterward, we swept wide out and saw in the distance in the open field a few pot soldiers running while carrying their wounded, trying to flee into a village in front of us. At that time we just fired a few bursts to chase them and did not pursue because chasing would be futile as they had run far away. When returning to check the scene of the recent battle, the pot troops had left behind 2 bodies lying on the floor, while it was unclear how many wounded they had dragged away. That noon we rested on that water-blocking dam to eat rice balls. I do not know which soldier threw a grenade into the river, but a lot of fish floated up, so a group jumped down to scoop them up. We rested there for about an hour, then returned to the billeting area that afternoon. The unit had a delicious meal to improve our diet. About a few days later, we took turns continuing to sweep the area behind the regiment headquarters. The enemy was like duckweed in a pond. When we swept, they dispersed, and when we left, they regrouped, which caused us many difficulties in the regiment stationing area, so we had to scour this area very thoroughly. It took a while for this area to stabilize temporarily, but the situation did not last long. One morning at only about more than 4 a.m., we heard gunfire exploding violently inside Persat town. Our unit, after a period of sweeping, was currently billeted right behind the town, about 1 kilometer away at that time. The entire unit immediately readied for combat. Then we received orders from the regiment to start from the west of the town with an additional prong marching in a wide circle to the north. and then sweeping back south along the Persat River. At that time I did not understand when. The enemy had hidden troops, or if they were double-faced Cambodian guerrillas leading the way, but they had managed to slip into the town successfully. The bridgehead areas crossing the river were controlled by their firepower. The administrative headquarters of Persat had also been seized by them. When our unit finished taking positions, we did not hurry to open fire immediately because at this time between us and the enemy positions were not yet defined, waiting until it was fully light and wet. Could see faces clearly. The enemy firepower positions were revealed on the other side of the civilian bridge, which was a small bridge about 1.5 meters wide connecting the two riverbanks. There was an enemy heavy machine gun blocking the bridgehead, firing torrential rain toward us, and sweeping along the riverbank to prevent us from crossing the bridge to the other side. At this time throughout Persat town gunfire was exploding chaotically and we could no longer distinguish which guns were the enemies and which were ours. Afterward, the unit had to bring up a 12.8mm gun to suppress the enemy machine gun, and then the P.3 had the condition to unleash its power. A loud explosion rang out along with a puff of smoke on the other side of the river, and the machine gun was destroyed. Seizing the opportunity, our brothers immediately moved across the bridge, very quickly crossing to the other side to capture the bridgehead. One heavy machine gun and one light machine gun fired along the riverbank to support the brothers crossing completely. After everyone had crossed to this side of the river, 2 infantry companies attacked, branching to both sides, while another company along with soldiers from the battalion headquarters attacked, developing toward the front. 2 82mm mortars located right at the bridgehead fired support at the request of the companies. Although there was a bit of passivity at first, now we had grasped the initiative. The pot troops started to run back toward the north. Many lost their direction and ran south, hoping to cross behind the outposts of Company 17, Company 18 and Company 20 to get into their leash base, but they were completely wiped out by these units, leaving not a single one. Meanwhile, in the direction our unit was sweeping to the north, the enemy was in chaos, running across an open field to find a way to hide in the scrub forest. They were chased by fire from the 12.8mm gun and a heavy machine gun on the left flank. An infantry platoon was driving them back toward the rear of the Company 20 outpost, so only the fastest runners might have escaped into the scrub forest, while the others were driven behind the outposts of the direct subordinate companies and completely destroyed by nearly 10 a.m. Our entire unit only had the task of clearing up the wounded. Those who were just scratched a bit were taken as prisoners, while the severe ones were left alone. Our unit also suffered damage, but it was light. While we did not know how many enemies were lost, we did not bother counting. Only the officers had to do this task, to report to superiors, while U.S. soldiers just continued to develop wide out, mainly to the north, to drive the enemy remnants far away from Persat town. That afternoon, our unit returned to the original position behind the regiment. The next morning, we left only a section behind, while everyone else continued to go sweep in the directions behind the regiment headquarters to clean up this area. Passing the first village, we saw no enemy coming to the second village, just about 50 meters from the village entrance. This village was quite large. The infantry companies divided into 2 wings to surround the village, while our battalion headquarters took charge of one direction. When we flooded in, we saw no enemy, only empty, dilapidated stilt houses, but there were signs of people. We cautiously advanced, suddenly seeing 3 guys in a house running away, so we all opened fire simultaneously. 2 guys ran about 20 meters and fell flat, while one ran and escaped. At the same time the companies were tightening the circle. Infantry gunfire exploded in bursts. The companies also encountered small enemy groups. They were surprised, unable to react in time, and could only run and be destroyed. The result was we harvested 7 guys along with 7 guns, including 2 K63 rifles. That afternoon, we returned to the stationing position. Come to think of it, throughout a quite long time sweeping in the Uran Mountain area, I was fine, yet when I got back here, I caught malaria. This cursed disease suddenly knocked me down after a few days of marching and sweeping. I had malaria, shivering, covering myself with a mosquito net in a hammock, yet my body shook violently, cold from the guts out, lying for a day without eating or drinking anything. By the afternoon, the fever broke and I felt dazed and foolish. My ears were ringing and my joints ached and fell apart. I had to lie in a corner at the battalion rear area, unable to eat or drink anything, until the next morning. I sipped a few spoons of rice water with sugar and gradually regained consciousness. Perhaps because of my health, I recovered quite quickly. After recovering, I left the battalion scouts to go to the regiment scout company, Company 20, because I did not keep a diary honestly until now. I still do not remember exactly when I went to the regiment scouts, only remembering it was the time after our unit had driven the enemy out of Percy. Saying goodbye to the battalion scouts and the brothers of the battalion headquarters for a time, our Company 20 was stationed holding positions along the road, 5-axis right near a high bridge about 2 or 3 kilometers from Persa town. At that time below the bridge was an outpost group, while the company headquarters was stationed back a bit to the rear of the outposts, where there was a high paddy dike and a few sugar palm trees. We in the platoons were spread out along the north of the road, while to the south across the road was a flat field slightly to the left in front of the outpost, were thorny bamboo thickets and scrub trees growing waist-high at the high bridge heading toward Leach. There was a stream that was dry this season. On both banks of the stream were quite dense thorny bamboo thickets, a terrain that seemed very favorable for the pot troops to ambush our supply convoys, and in reality, during the time we were stationed here, the enemy dug many bunkers to lie in ambush all along the road from our outpost down Road 5 toward Phnom Penh. I also do not remember exactly how many kilometers the stretch was, only remembering that at that time, besides us, there was no unit stationed on this route. Therefore, we had to work very hard every time there was a supply truck. Whenever there was an order to clear the road, we had to pack rice balls to go on patrol duty, waiting until the trucks passed before slowly rolling back. One day early in the morning, we received a mission to clear the road. Just like every other time, we prepared light gear. At that time, our Company 20 did not have heavy weapons, only AKs. That day, I remember the company assigned a platoon to do the road clearing duty. About more than 10 brothers started marching, having to walk close to the road edge, not daring to go down to the roadside for fear of mines. Walking about 3 kilometers toward Phnom Penh, we encountered a big tree the pot troops had chopped down across the road to make an obstacle. This had been cut into sections by our engineers and pushed to the side of the road to clear traffic. The position where we stopped was on the left of the road. About 10 meters away was an M113 that had been burnt. I did not know if it was our vehicle or the enemy's. We waited there. Whenever a vehicle passed, we would return with the vehicle. At about more than 9 a.m., we heard a rumbling sound from the direction of Phnom Penh. Growing louder, we went out to the road surface to welcome the convoy. This time there were 2 M113s. Running lead was an M113, followed by a convoy of transport trucks carrying goods. The convoy stopped, and an officer got down to grasp the situation of the road ahead. We were allowed to get on the vehicles to sit, but were prioritized to sit on the lead armored vehicle. The position was not inside the vehicle, but 2 of us sat dangling on the 2 sides of the 12.8mm gun, while some other brothers sat in the back of the cargo trucks. The vehicle was running smoothly when suddenly from the front several bursts of gunfire rang out, not knowing where they were firing because we did not hear the hiss of bullets, and in this area there were not soldiers of ours holding the road, so the 12.8mm gun on the vehicle immediately unleashed bullets toward both sides of the road in front, just running and firing. The 2 of us just had to sit and take it behind us. Soldiers on other trucks also started to join in, so the vehicles just marched and fired like that to get past the enemy ambush position, then stopped firing. The 2 of us did not need to fire a single shot because our hands were busy holding onto the vehicle side, and the step were else were the hands to shoot. Until nearly 12 p.m. the vehicle arrived in front of the Company 20 outpost, letting us off. After greeting the soldiers protecting the convoy, the officer from earlier smiled and asked us if anyone was hurt. We said, "No sir, no one is hurt, but we have gone completely deaf. Next time, even if invited enthusiastically, we would not dare to sit on the nose of the vehicle again. Better to march on the infantry's 2 feet. It is more enjoyable." At this time, besides the duty of protecting the road, we also had to penetrate deep to grasp the enemy situation and find their defensive positions to prepare for the attack on their final lair in Leach. So the soldiers had to take turns doing duty at night. Groups took turns finding paths to slip behind the enemy outposts. The hardest part was crossing the railroad track. 10 nights we might get through. 3 there were many nights the scouts slipped inside, but could not get back out in time. The brothers had to lie inside the Leach Forest area about 1 kilometer from the railroad track, waiting until the next night to be able to get out. At this time, us brothers, from officers to soldiers, honestly did not look like humans, just like a bunch of forest ghosts. Meanwhile, near the outposts of the direct subordinate companies, the enemy always attacked fiercely in front of our company outpost. The area of thorny scrub bamboo and the dry stream was very convenient for us to penetrate deep, but it was also a place where the enemy could place ambush groups and organize to penetrate back behind the regiment headquarters. There were nights we poked through several times without success, and had to quietly turn back that morning, having just returned after a night of deep penetration without results. Sleeping soundly, suddenly there was gunfire on the side of Company 18, which was stationed west of our outpost, but situated a bit higher. Gunfire of all calibers was exploding violently, opening with the sounds of various firepower. B-40, B-41. It took about more than an hour later for the gunfire to gradually sparse out, and then stop completely. Only then did we learn that Company 18 had been pushed off their post. We had to be very vigilant in case the enemy attacked the Company 20 outpost, so until morning we just had to lie in the fortifications, eyes wide and ears pricked up, listening, fighting off the sleepiness, until the sky finally began to lighten at about nearly 8 a.m. We were ordered to attack the left flank, to advance to the Company 18 outpost, while the center and right flank were handled by Battalion 8. After the mortars of Battalion 8 stopped, we simultaneously charged, crossing the open field quickly to cling to the village edge, where the Company 18 outpost was. After approaching the village edge, looking to the right flank, we saw Battalion 8 had also reached the village edge on that flank, panting a bit to catch our breath. Then we started to attack, flooding in to retake the Company 18 outpost. On the Battalion 8 side, firepower was still exploding rapidly, while on our side we also had firepower, because when we entered the village edge, Company 5 of Battalion 8 had come over to support us with firepower. The enemy at this time had been pushed out of the Company 18 outpost. They were running, drifting to the open field, and then diving headfirst back into the forest edge in front. When we arrived, we saw the enemy had left behind many dead bodies in the communication trenches, and others who could not stand the heat of the Battalion 8 mortars had to abandon their bunkers to run, and were also destroyed outside. Later, Company 18 was also tired because of the scent of enemy bodies not buried carefully. That day, after regaining the outpost, the soldiers of Company 18 went to check their belongings and trenches, but there was nothing left whatever could be used. The pot troops had grabbed and gone. Otherwise, they destroyed everything, leaving nothing left. It was also very lucky that when Company 18 was pushed off the post, there were martyrs from Company 18, but because it was still dark, the pot troops did not have time to mutilate the martyrs when attacking. Moving across the open field, I ran past a paddy dike and saw a martyr of Company 18 lying across the dike, but at that time, because I was busy running forward, I did not know who it was. After taking the outpost, Han compatriot in Company 18 ran out crying that Brother Kai, sacrificed out on the paddy dike. Brother Key was a B-40 soldier, and also a compatriot. Only then did I know the sadness was that afterward I could not go out to him because my unit had to withdraw immediately after handing over the outpost to Company 18. Those days, it could be said, the war seemed to drag on endlessly, day after day, month after month, almost without a moment of rest. Many times we would startle and ask each other, where did Guy A or Guy B go, or when was he wounded? Allow me to speak a bit off topic. Recently, I sat hanging out with Han. He recounted that a few days before that, on the exact death anniversary of Brother Key, he went down to light incense for him, but he lit it forever, and the incense would not burn at that moment. He started to tremble afterward. Dung, the amputee, came in to light the incense, and it burned. Perhaps since Brother Kai sacrificed until now, he had not visited his house once, because he and Key, besides being compatriots, were brothers in the same company, and I do not know if he was still mad at him. During the time our unit was stationed on the Road 5 line during the day, we had to endure the sun because lying north of the road there was not a single shade tree, but luckily, being in an open field, there was a bit of breeze at night except for the section doing deep penetration duty. All remaining brothers had to stretch out to protect the outpost. The enemy did not spare any trick. They attacked almost continuously into our outposts and other companies. At that time, our Company 20 outpost had a bit more advantage, because lying on the high road axis, so every time the pot troops wanted to attack, it was harder back then. Occasionally we also organized attacks expanding wide to the front of the outpost, mainly along the dry stream, to destroy the ambush bunkers of the enemy. But I must admit, these pot troops had a vanishing act that was really fast. Just as they saw a sortie past the road surface, they had already disappeared. We did not dare go deep into that low bamboo forest for fear of hitting mines and being trapped by them. The two sides just seesawed like that forever, which was boring at that time. We just hoped we would quickly finish off their leash base once and for all, so we could be a bit comfortable otherwise like this. It was very uncomfortable then. That day also. Arrived that day at around 4 p.m, we led Battalion 8 into the assembly position south of Road 5, slightly to the left in front of our Company 20 outpost. where there was thorny bamboo forest and scrub trees. At about 5 p.m. or a bit later, the gunfire opening the battle for the final base of the genocidal clique began. I do not know how it was in other places, but in our direction all infantry soldiers of the companies roared and advanced. The battle exploded violently because we had completely grasped the initiative. The enemy, losing their footing, had to put their heads down and run. The unit captured the first position at this place. The enemy fortifications and trenches were very rudimentary. Battalion 8 attacked, developing further, just crossing near the open space in front to cling to the railroad track. But with only about 5 or 6 meters left to the railroad track, the enemy utilized the higher railroad track. It seemed this was their second line of defense. Enemy firepower of all kinds at this time opened fire violently into the attacking formation. Our brothers had already suffered wounded and sacrifices. We had to bury our heads into the earth mounds and sugar palm roots to fight back, but because of the disadvantageous position we had to lie there and take the beating along such a long stretch of railroad. The enemy had positioned 60mm and 82mm mortars to fire rapidly onto the railroad track to suppress enemy firepower so that our